Hey, hello everyone. I see people are coming into the Zoom room, so we'll just wait a couple minutes. I know sometimes people from our university especially work on Ryerson time, which means they only show up 10 minutes after the hour. Though I think with Zoom, we're getting better at showing up punctually.
Actually, while we're waiting for all the other audience to come in, Ryan, out down south in States, you guys are all in person, right?
Yeah, for the most part. Yeah, they were masks were mandatory, but classes have been resuming in person mostly. Various vaccine mandates as well, depending on the institution.
Lucked out. And then I'm assuming the over in Peter's side of the industry, with all the pandemic going down, I mean, and it's the kind of restrictions being opened up, are your clients a little bit more receptive to make business boom?
Well, I'm in Vietnam right now. I got here last night, about 4 hours ago. And so I don't know what time it is. Yeah, things are, they're eager to have us back, and things are starting to reopen. It's been on a sort of, everyone seems to be on a different schedule. So it's good as a global company that we get to interface with people at different times as they come online or offline. But it's been super challenging.
Yeah. And then at the same time, like with all the challenges that you've overcome, I mean, I know that Alex, in your industry, the pandemic, we see it in Toronto and in Vancouver, for example, but like, I mean, has it been just business as usual in the pandemic for the set and film and TV industry?
There was a bit of a break in the beginning. There was a hiatus for about 2 months, but then we started working from home again. And then since then, it's sort of become a hybrid approach. So they try to keep whoever can work from home at home, who's in the office, and then everyone who's in the studio or on set, they have to go in, but they have extremely strict testing protocols. It's really, really strict. Everyone who works in the office, even though I'm working from home, when I'm going in for meetings, I still have to get tested once a week. And people who are in the office, the studio, they get tested 3 times a week. So it's quite strict.
Impressive. Alrighty. So I don't know. Risa, are we going with Ryerson time then, or how do you want to do this?
No, I think we can get started as we do the introductions. I think people will flow in, especially because Peter's in Vietnam. We didn't realize there would be a time difference, so apologize for that.
Peter's just laying on more guilt for me, so that when he do stuff in person, I have more stuff to, he can run up a tab next time I see him now.
It's no problem at all. Just getting ready for breakfast. No big deal.
Awesome. Okay. Well, hello, everyone. I'm Risa Braganza. I'm this year's AIAS chapter president. I'd like to welcome you all to our Beyond Architecture event. We all know that architecture is a really widespread industry, and we hope that after this event, you'll have a better understanding of the various career paths you can go into with an architecture degree. And we know that while breaking away from conventional practice can seem daunting, especially at this point in our careers, our 3 guests are examples of the success you can have when you take an unconventional route after graduation. So with that being said, I'd like to introduce you to our panelists today. We have Alexandra Juzkiw, a set designer at the Directors Guild of Canada and Ontario, Ryan Scavnicky, an architectural designer and theorist, as well as the CEO of Extra Office, which I hope you'll be able to learn more about today, and Peter Marshall, the creative director at FORREC, doing a theme park design around the world, as you can tell. So thank you so much for taking the time with us to be with us today. We know we have really busy schedules, so we do appreciate it. We're also joined today by our faculty advisor, Vincent Hui, and our events coordinator, Nicole Gabriel, who will be moderating our panel today. We'll be starting with short presentations by each of our guests to further introduce you to their work and what they're doing right now. And then after that, we'll go into general discussion panel where we'll be asking them our burning questions. So we're welcoming all of our guests to actually use the Q&A function and ask questions as we go along so that you can have them kind of answered as the discussion progresses. But there'll be more time at the end as well if you want to save your questions for then, but we would like to get them going as we kind of go through our own questions. The event is being recorded right now, and it'll be made available for everyone who's registered through the Eventbrite. So I think with that being said, we can pass it on to Vince and Nicole to get us started.
All right, so you've pretty much covered all the bases that I think Nicole and I wanted to cover. So in the interest of trying to get as much out of our guests today, I think the first person we'll throw it to is my man, Ryan Scavnicki. Would you care to share your screen and present?
Sure. Hey, everyone. Super thankful for the invitation. Really glad to be here and really excited to talk about this topic. My inclusion is, I feel, a very great honor because while I am operating in architecture in a very different kind of way as a practice, I'm not exactly out of architecture. My day job is that I am a faculty at Kent State University, but I began a practice called Extra Office, where I call it a media practice, where I investigate contemporary culture, media, aesthetics as a bona fide method for the production of architectural theory and as a stage for critical practice. So I'm somewhere between writer, influencer, and sort of like Twitch streamer. Like I kind of do a little bit of everything. So I'm just going to introduce you to some of the things that I do and some of the thoughts that I have before I get started. So I do teach a course in theory in media, and this is me eating a bowl of flamin' hot Cheetos mac and cheese on a live stream because, as one of my great mentors, Manfredo Tafuri, an architectural theorist, says, criticism must therefore function within the cycles of production. It must, by becoming operative, serve as a stimulus in order to shift the plan to increasingly advanced levels. And and I am doing this rather quickly so we can get all to the questions, because that's really what I'm interested in. But I will say that one of my first jobs in architecture was when I was a grad student, and we sent a tweet to the president of the university about how our ceiling was falling on us as grad students. And this tweet actually set off the impetus. Don't look at the year, okay? This tweet actually set forth the impetus to get architecture done, to actually create the project, right? And so I was asked to design a thesis room, which was really cool because it needed to be done anyway. But that kind of set me off on a path of thinking about social media's role in how architecture can be born, right? Here's the room now. I also had a practice. So I went to SciArc and I did a media practice where I created videos to like wrap up famous lectures and take those lectures and put them on YouTube. But it was like a top 10, kind of like a ESPN top 10 breakdown of important lectures. So the idea of the production of content as media was in my postgraduate research at SciArc as well. I'm not going to play this for you. This is, and also I did a teaching gig at the School of Architecture at Taliesin. And then created a meme page on Instagram of myself where I would begin to generate memes as a form of both critique of architecture culture and as a way to create more productive conversations about architecture on the internet. And the way that that this practice so that practice begets other practices, right? So I'm very much a kind of, right now, like to talk about it literally, a kind of gig economy worker, right? Where I'm like doing a host of many different things, but all involving an exploration of media, all involving an exploration of humor and criticism of architecture. And also I'm on TikTok. It's getting interesting. I'm going to skip through a couple of these, but what I started to do was take architecture critique to video games and use video games as a tool to reach a wider audience about how we think about architecture and why architecture is valuable and why architecture can help you tell stories, right? And what makes it good or bad? Here's a pretty good one. Some of you might have seen this. It kind of went pretty far, but I don't know. I probably have to cut this one short, so I'm gonna keep going. But you should look it up. And then I do live stream on Twitch where we look at the architecture of various video games and the production of a series of YouTube videos where I look at architecture theory through the lens of gaming, which is probably how Vince and I became connected the most, was our interest in games. And yeah, lately I've been doing Elden Ring, and also I think it was worthwhile to talk about this, which is my last bit, which is also in publication and writing. So I do a lot of writing criticism for Architect's Newspaper and other outlets where I get to sort of express general ideas about architecture to others, and I think that's a really important role. And thank you. That's me.
Damn,
Hopefully that
man.
wasn't too long. I'm sorry.
No, it wasn't. Listen, man, I think do you take a breath at all of that? Man, is that how your typical lectures go?
No. I got tons more, but I want to hear from everyone else and get questions.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Ryan. And I think just again, folks, if you have questions, we're amassing them, and Nohemi's taking the notes. But if there are questions, please keep them coming, and we can just roll them out after all of our guests presented. So with that said, Alex, young lady, you are the next person on Present or Not.
Okay, here we go. 1 sec. Wait. Okay. So I started my architecture career at Waterloo. I graduated with my master's, and then I started working at &Co Architects shortly before I graduated, and then I was there for 3 years. And then meanwhile, I was considering other options in architecture, both being film and the second one being real estate development. I was also interested in the business side of architecture, so I pursued both. In 2009, I joined the Directors Guild of Canada, which is the union for the film industry. But then I worked on 3 shows, and then I decided I wanted to still pursue the business side of architecture options. So I got my MBA at the Rotman School of Management, and then I worked at CIBC and Infrastructure Ontario, and then I kind of realized that I missed film. I missed the creative aspect of being around passionate people, because business is very different than working in a creative field. So I went back to film, and I've been in film since. And then in 2017, I accepted an offer for a show in Vancouver. So I spent the last 4.5 years in Vancouver, and then I came back last year. So I got to experience Toronto film industry as well as the Vancouver film industry. So I'll just go through some projects that I worked on. So the most recent one in Vancouver was Lost in Space season 3. And so it was all spaceship stuff. And so this was a rendering done by a concept artist, but he took my model, and I'll just show you the process of how it started. So it started with this sketch that the production designer, which is the boss of the department, he gave me just this little plan and section. And then I developed them in AutoCAD and Rhino. I modeled them out and figured out all the spacing and the scaling. And then this was the exterior piece, which I gave to the concept artist, and he created that first image that we saw. And then each of these pieces was divided up to different set designers. So I took the front, which is a cockpit, and then this just shows you an example of a construction drawing that I would make once I developed the set. And this is what I would hand off to our construction team, and they would build from this. And then these are some other details of the counter inside. And then this is what it looked like when it was finished. So this is a finished cockpit and this counter detail that you saw. And then this is what it looks like on screen. So when you watch season 3, episode 1, first few minutes, this is the first set that you'll see. And then this was the outside. So you get both the inside and the outside for this particular set. And then this was a set design for a series of unfortunate events. So for the process of this one, it was a little bit different. I didn't get a sketch from the production designer. I got this this rendering. So sometimes production designers work with concept artists and they create just 2D images, and then they hand these off to the set designer. So it's up to the set designer to make it 3D. So then I developed it in Rhino as well. And then this was a construction floor plan of the set. It was a curvy corridor. So the kids were being chased through all these. So they all had to link up, and they go up and down and ramps and stairs. And then these are just some finished set photos of different rooms that were also part of that same set. This was a feature film I worked on when I was a junior set designer. It was called Crimson Peak by Guillermo del Toro. And so here are just some finished shots of what it looks like, the library set, and then the entrance foyer of the house. And then this was for Star Trek Discovery Season 1. This was the sarcophagus Klingon ship. And this was also pretty fun because there's no straight lines. Everything is very organic. So this was an extremely elaborate build. It was very expensive. The set was probably over $6 million, and they only used it for a few episodes, and then it got torn down. So yeah, so this was a really, really crazy set that I got to work on, but it was a lot of fun, and it was a massive team. There's probably about 10 people working on different pieces of it. And then this is a bit more normal. It was just this is a Federation ship, just one of the corridor sets. And then so construction drawings, and then different views of the different parts of the corridor. Other sets as well that were also Federation ship, part of the Federation. And then this was a Snake Eyes feature film I worked on. We built this alley in the studio. It's supposed to take place in Tokyo. And so it was raining, so that's why there's wetness everywhere. And so they made it rain in the studio, and they had chase scenes going down these alleyways on motorcycles. And then this is just a drawing of one of the elevations. And then this is a detail of this sign. And oh, I think I have one more. So, and yeah, this was the weapons facility. This was in an old temple in Japan, but we built this also in the studio. And then we had this weapons, sort of modern glass box weapons area in the back that the character, he has to break into in the movie. If I don't know if anyone's seen it, but, and then these are the construction drawings for the ceiling, just for an example. And yeah, I guess we can leave it at that.
Oh, okay. Wow. Gotta say, that's pretty impressive stuff. And just for all the audience, that I know some people are just joining us now, but this is going to be like the equivalent of architecture school meets Big Bang Theory. Like, this is the time where all the nerdiness comes out. Like, we were talking about video games, Star Trek-y stuff, and everything in between. And of course, that's a good lead into our third speaker, which is Peter Marshall. And you can see how this all comes to play with this kind of weird hybridization of architecture and the kind of thematic IPs that you're seeing in Alex's work.
Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Absolutely.
I'm setting my timer, 5 minutes. Let's see where we get to. Here we go. Intro. I went to school at University of Waterloo back in 1990. It was in the Waterloo campus at this time, but here's the scenic view of when it moved to Cambridge. Architecture is an amazing education that can be applied to a whole bunch of different things. So congratulations for making that choice. It's been great for me. This is my graduating year. I was in co-op. It took me 9 years to get through the program. It was a 6-year program. I liked having work. I kept staying at work, but I also failed second year. Just to give you guys some confidence that if you're struggling along the way, that hang in there. Co-op was during the recession, so I did a lot of crazy jobs, including a lot of landscape and construction, post-hole digging, et cetera, I know times are tough for a lot of people, so yeah, hang in there if you can. I graduated and started working in this coffee shop at Lettieri at Queen and Spadina, just down the street from my house. Again, not what I'd envisioned, but soon after that, I got a job at an architecture firm around the corner. And then after working there for a couple of years, my dream job, you play video games. And then I was thinking about how I could potentially make video games. And I got a job at Rockstar, where we made The Warriors, an adaptation of a 1970s film. I was the lighting designer, and I had taught myself V-Ray in architecture school, an applicable skill for that team. It was pretty intense working there. I did about 3 years overtime in 5 years, and eventually had a young child and needed to leave to focus on other things. But we finished the game, and I moved on to Design Store, which is an architectural visualization firm where we did photoreal renderings. It was great time there. I spent maybe 10 years there, I think. Ended up being sort of the director of the studio. But after that many years, kind of figured out that, maybe it was time for something different. And then I was kind of at the end of the design cycle. And so I read this really cool book, which I highly recommend, which is from some of the Apple designers, a course that they offer at one of the US universities, but they made a book of it as well. Within that, there's lots of tools to sort of get to the root of, how you might find fulfillment in your life. For me, one of the really cool tools that I discovered in there was a mind map. Because, when you're trying to think about what you might want to do next, you start imagining what that might be. And you can dig into that in sort of a bit more detail. Here's the new job research, and one way to sort of start making connections and interacting with people, get your feelers out, is to go and meet people and ask them what they find fulfilling about their work. And when you're talking to them, you can start to imagine what it is that you might like to do in your life when you're changing gears. And that brought me to FORREC. After I discovered that I really needed to be at the front end of the designing process, and that was going to be where I would find fulfillment, not at the back end doing the renderings when it's already designed, but doing the sort of ideation at the very front end of the creative process. It's a team of 120 people in Liberty Village. It's been around for 35 years, which is kind of interesting because you think of it as a niche. But really big projects around the world. We did, Universal Studios way back when in Florida. We worked with Lego on some of the biggest parks in the world, and still with Universal Studios, we're doing some of the new zones. And as a part of that job, I've got to travel all around the world, which has just been amazing. And one of the projects I worked on, I was creative director for, it's just being built in Dubai. It's an expansion of an existing theme park zone. The theme park is in Dubai. It's called Motion Gate, and the zone is Lionsgate. Lionsgate films are the ones you might know: John Wick, Now You See Me, and this was the first John Wick theme park. Big fan of the film, and the goal is to try and dig into the story and understand the role of the guest, and because not everybody can be John Wick, and how do you pull iconography from, not just one film, but four, and find a way to bring it to life, not just in a ride that says John Wick on it and it's painted black, but how could you sort of set the stage in terms of a zone? And so we had to draft up these elevations and figure out this insane ride. And here's our renderings and illustrations on the left-hand side. An amazing team of architects, landscape architects, interior designers, master planners, and concept artists working together to model these things up in 3D, test them in VR, and then bring them to life, one-to-one almost. So it was amazing to go and see these, what are crazy concepts brought to life in this, multi-million-dollar theme park. I've got the last slide for me is this video, which would theoretically play. It's this, if I go back, there we go, see if this works. It's the cheesy promo film from the theme park operator themselves. And if it links up through Wi-Fi, here we go. Come on, little buddy. No, that's an,
Contract Comunicado is now in session.
Do you guys have any volume on that?
Yep, we're hearing it. But it's a little bit jankety. But Peter, can you also send the link at some point to us, and we'll circulate to the rest of the people?
Sure. So you get the idea. You go through the whole intro zone. There you go. And yeah, just as a final slide, a really great group of people to work with, incredibly diverse in terms of age and experience and you know, where they come from culturally. And it's just been a great place to work. And that's it for me.
Alrighty then. Well, thank you very much for everyone's presentations. And I know that we're building up a stock of questions in the background, so keep those questions coming, folks. But I think that we just want to make sure we get some general lay of the land questions. So I'll throw it to Nicole.
Yeah, thank you so much for those presentations, everyone. They were like really exciting, and hopefully we'll get into more with these questions. But our first general question is, we know from your experience, like from our experience, that architecture degree can take you on completely different career paths, as we've just seen. But as students, we're often very focused, like right now, on this singular path, kind of becoming an architect. So our question for you guys is, at what point did you know that you did not want to pursue architecture and go into a different field? I know you kind of touched on them on your presentations, but was there a point that like really inspired you to turn into the specific path, or like Ryan to turn more into that focus of like media and architecture? Peter, we'll start with you if that's okay.
Sure. Yeah, my friends are all still architects. The friendships I've made there have been with me for life. You know, a small, intense group of people. My wife is an architect still. Yeah, so are most of my friends. I made a list of reasons of why I thought architecture was not for me. And it was these 10 really, really good reasons that I, you know, was kind of moaning about in school, but then when I graduated, they were still true. And so I started to open my mind to how I could apply this incredible skill set that I'd learned to other, you know, professions.
Yeah. Was there like a certain point though that you knew you wanted to go into like gaming or your theme park design, or did it, like from your presentation, like you gradually worked your way there?
I had always kind of envisioned it. And so I just was always kept my mind open to other opportunities. I wanted to try architecture once I graduated, and I had a chance to try it a bit in co-op as well. But right from the onset, I was imagining that I always thought about it as going away from architecture and then coming back to it. And so I guess that's what's happened. I wanted to go away and learn some other things and then come back and bring that mindset to the architectural practice, because I am designing buildings right now, but in a really different sort of angle.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I guess the same kind of goes for Alex, what you're doing now. So the same question for you, if you'd like to answer that one next.
Sure, yeah. So I guess when I started working was probably maybe after the first year or second year working, I sort of solidified just working full time. I was just noticing how different working in an architecture office was from actual architecture school. And just in architecture school, there's so much more freedom to design, and when you're working in an office, there's so many more rules and restrictions and building codes and zoning bylaws and all that stuff that you don't have to deal with when you're in school. So that was a little bit shocking to me, because basically you go from being able to design whatever you want to not being able to design anything. Like it's very, very strict and regimented. And I think just that all those strict rules are sort of what maybe made me start thinking like, okay, what else can I do? What are some other design options? Like, where can I be more free to design? And also in film, you design very quickly and then it gets built very quickly. So it's just, the process is very fast forwarded. Whereas in real world, I would be working on projects for years, like like, I don't know, the whole time I was there, 3 years, maybe one project. And then one of the projects I started in 2009 didn't get built until, I don't even know, like 2017 or something. Like that project was on hold and then started up again on hold. So I think that was all those frustrations were kind of just building up. And one of my bosses just said, like, if you want to get out, if you want to try other things, he's like, do it. Like now, like leave, like go explore. He's like, if you want to explore, now's the time to explore. So yeah, so that's when I started to consider it, I would say.
Thank you so much. And then Ryan will wrap this question up with you.
Sure. I realized, first of all, I love architecture. I like to make it. But I think that we have enough buildings in general, and I found that I felt like what I learned in architecture school could possibly be more valuable than making buildings, especially as a worker in an architecture office. My contributions, while meaningful to me, felt like maybe there's another way. And I think for me, just sort of spreading or talking about different issues, sort of teaching about architectural ideas to other people became for me a more exciting idea. But also like in the creation of like creating things, spaces in a different way, creating interpersonal spaces, and like thinking about the production of things outside of architecture more seriously as architecture, and sort of bringing them in to work on changing the field a little bit. Because I think a lot of people perceive disillusionment with architecture, rightly so. And I'm wondering if a lot of that is because the way we teach and the way we expect people to operate in the world. Because like I'm joined by two architects on this panel, and they are doing architecture just as much as anybody else. And I think it's important to think about how we might change the way we teach, change the way we talk about architecture, change the way we think about what it is, more than like these sort of strict inherited rules that we've had.
Oh,
Yes,
and Peter, Peter, are you bring up your hand?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think to follow on from Alex and Ryan's point, one of the key things was to not define architecture as the creation of a built project, and to not get stuck in that. For me, the creation of a cool narrative and a cool creative concept, if it goes nowhere, that's fine. That act of creation and that act of design does not have to be manifested as a built project or a 2D architecture, right? There are many forms it can take.
Yeah. So I think that's a really good way to lead into my big question, because there is a diversity of not only just what architecture entails, but also just a diversity of the kind of skill sets and connections. So, all three of you are working outside the conventional architectural practice in varying degrees, despite having all that same background academically in architecture. So I'm going to start off the questioning to ladies first. Alex, okay. So what was your experience branching into your field without necessarily having the background experience and connections that are typically made during your academic career? Now, you touched on it, but just it's worth hitting it up.
Yeah, so I guess in the film industry, they value experience more than anything else. So you don't necessarily need like being an architect is above and beyond what you need. Most people, well, maybe half and half. A lot of people have interior design background, so they start a lot younger because they just do the 3 or 4 year interior design degree, and then they can start working in film right away. And then with film, it's you build your connections based on the previous show you have. So the first show to get your foot in the door is actually quite difficult. You have to network a lot. And so the way I did it was I had a friend at work, a colleague, who her classmate from Waterloo, he switched into the film industry. So she introduced me to him. And he was actually the one who was my first contact. And he wrote me a reference letter to get into the union. And then he introduced me to some other people. So that's sort of how you start networking. But the way in is just you have to network and you have to hustle at the very beginning, because you have to, and you also have to start at the very bottom. So my experience as an architect, which I had my co-op, I had about 2.5 years of co-op work experience from Waterloo, and also 3 years of post-grad work experience. They put you at the bottom and you have to still work your way up. So that was a little bit tough at the beginning because I knew I was overqualified to be doing an entry-level position. But once you're in, then you can move up fairly quickly. But just deciding and making myself start at the bottom again was a little hard, I would say, at first.
Okay. And I guess the same question goes to you, Ryan. Basically, with that kind of background, how'd you get cut into the experience and the connections? I mean, man, you really got to hang out with Harmon, huh?
Yeah, I mean, well, like going to going to SciArc, if that's part of your interest or part of in academia is a really weird place to also work. It's very your pedigree does matter quite a bit, and schools across the country are still quite biased towards like a degree from an Ivy League institution or a degree from a place like SciArc with this reputation. And I think that those type of I think that that's really it can be sucky. Like it's not great. So I think that establishing it's hard to directly answer this question, but I think in a media space it's really difficult because a lot of the content that's created about architecture that's on the internet is really fluffy and positive and just sort of cute. And I think, and I don't think people want to hear criticism that's just like, unless it's really funny, like people critique like just gross stuff on Zillow or something, right? But how you form a relationship with humor to critique to education to make architecture and learning about it entertaining and valuable at the same time without being negative or condescending or elitist. Those are the things that I've had to transform in order to kind of get a foothold in any type of space, if that makes sense.
No, it definitely does. Just that it's some next level thinking that I think a lot of students don't necessarily have on that, and I think it's a little bit daunting, intimidating, just to kind of get a good understanding of the diversity. And I'll just go back to you, Peter. Can you just comment on that kind of skill set, experience, connections that got you from architecture into the eclectic mix of career paths you went on?
Sure. Well, I've commented previously about how excellent the education is. And so I find that architecture students, when working outside of their field, there's a kind of a rigor, a design rigor that's brought to the process that employers and teammates respect because of the sort of type of thinking and the approach to problem solving that's very useful across fields. I guess I've changed professions 3 times, like straight up, just dropped it and started again. I guess I'll get a little bit older, and as you get older, you kind of start to carry a little bit of that experience with you, but it's still pretty daunting, as Alex said, to come in cold to a new profession. You just kind of, a piece of advice that I had from a friend was that if you don't know what you're doing, that's okay, because you're bringing a different skill set to the job. So they're going to learn from you as much as you're going to learn from them. So respect that process and respect what you've learned along the way. And keep your connections open, like stay in touch with people and keep your mind open, ready to learn new things. I never thought about it as dropping what I'd learned and leaving that behind. I always thought of it as building additional skill sets that overlay onto one another.
Okay, all right, excellent. So I think we've kind of hit up the big questions right off the bat, but we've got a pent up torrent of questions that we want to kind of knock out for you folks. So I guess, Nicole, do you want to start asking between you and Nohemi?
Sure. So I'll ask our first question. Alex, this was from you when your presentation was going on. You mentioned about working in like the Toronto film industry and then the Vancouver film industry. So the question is, how are those like two industries compared to each other, and how was the transition between them if they were very different?
I would say the job itself is the same as in terms of the set design and process and the structure of the department. What was different were the unions. So in Ontario, it's the Directors Guild of Canada, and in Vancouver, it's IATSE. So I had to become a member of the different union, and that union is the same union that's in LA. So they have a different culture in Vancouver, I would say. It's more like an American style because I guess they started a lot earlier and follow the American style of working. So their work hours are actually longer than in Ontario by a couple hours a day. So in Vancouver, it's 12-hour days. And in Toronto, it's about 10 hours. And so I would say work-life balance is a bit more important to people in Toronto, and it's a bit more progressive here because they're really trying to push for shorter days here. But in Vancouver, it's just a bit more traditional, I would say, like just the way they do film. It's just a bit more old school style, and the culture is older school style. So I think just adapting to the different culture and sort of the different social norms of the West Coast. Like everybody thinks West Coast is more relaxed, but actually in film, it's more intense because they're following the American way of working. So it hasn't, like, the assumptions about West Coast being relaxed does not apply in the film industry at all. So that was something I also had to adjust to.
Thank you so much. That's actually very interesting though, because I wouldn't have thought that. And Noemi, do you want to ask our next question?
Yeah, there was another question. This one's for Peter. Someone was saying that they remember you mentioning the John Wick project last year when you came to the Beyond Architecture event, and they were wondering what the timeline for a project like that would be.
It's about 3 years. Year one is concept master plan on a high level, and then digging into sort of trying to bring that to life in elevation and 3D. Looking back over my career, I'd say a common thread is 3D modeling and visualization of spaces that don't exist yet, and sort of trying to imagine how to bring it to life before it's brought to life. And then, we hand off to a local team and they build it up. And it's a good thing we checked in VR that everything was working, because they just went ahead and built everything.
Wow.
And it turned out okay. Just sort of following your passion, flow state. For me, it's all about visualization and trying to think through something that doesn't exist yet. And that seems to be a common thread, and was helpful in that process. So 3 years, I'd say, 3-4 years.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
So Ryan, now we have a question for you. So why is it important for you to advertise your content to be like relatable or relevant to those who are outside of architecture? So like you're doing it through video games and kind of critiquing through the video games, which I think is so cool. So like, why is that important?
I'd say like maybe something I didn't make clear enough for the audience was like a career in academia, and Vince can possibly corroborate this. But what is nice is that you get to take something you're passionate about in architecture, and you get time and space and resources to see that through. Okay, so what I get to do is play video games and look at the architectural content, and I am interested in how we as a discipline interact with the public, or I like to teach architects how to talk to people about architecture, and I like to have fun, and so like these aspects of an academic career are really important, because you are not tethered to the hustle creation of content necessarily. I'm not trying to rush to make a YouTube channel with 1 million subs. Like I'm just making stuff that I'm passionate about and I have fun with. And that's what's great about an academic career, is that it kind of frees you from a lot of those things in a way, not completely, but in a way. And so I think that that's, it's important for me because it's what I like to do with my research time.
Thank you. No, that's like very good to know and stuff like that. So, Noemi, do you have another question? More question?
Yeah, there's one here for Alex for during your presentation, and it's about your preference. Do you prefer building a set from scratch inside of a studio, or transforming an already existing building or space to become that set?
I think I would say from scratch in the studio, because I guess it's more of a blank canvas. And I think, yeah, we just do more of that. I specifically work on shows where I design more stuff from scratch rather than using existing buildings. There's just more you can do, more creativity rather than just transforming something that already exists, I think. But people do both. Like there are shows that just shoot on location and they just maybe change like a wall or a door or something. But I just think the other, designing a set, is more fun.
Yeah, definitely sounds like you get more freedom, a little bit more fun. I could totally see that.
So Peter, our next question is for you. So someone said, ever since I heard about FORREC in second year, I've been super interested in them. I'm graduating from interior design this summer, and my question is, what kind of things do you look for in a portfolio or resume that would help them stand out?
That's a great question. It's a really interesting world to slip into. And I found that the most important was trying to figure out a way to contribute to the design process. In any, like, you know, how are you gonna, when you jump in, you can take on whatever you want to take on here, and people will help you, are very open-minded. But how are you going to present your ideas, and how are you going to prototype concepts? So have you learned Blender, or do you use SketchUp? Or like, how do you get an idea from sketch form to someone hands you a little napkin sketch? How are you going to test that out and realize it to sort of go, oh, it could be like this? Is it an elevation with, like, you know, call outs for imagery? So I would say having your own production system internally for how you visualize ideas, regardless of what the ask is from the office. I mean, they're going to have specific software they use, but you can interface into that at FORREC. You know, it's kind of like, how are you going to contribute to this sort of ideation process? So yeah, working on your own little pipeline from sketch to test render, having that in your skill set would be extremely helpful. And an open mind and an endless desire to make stuff up.
Yeah, that's helpful, especially for a lot of people who are like, we're putting our portfolios together. We're looking like for co-ops and stuff. So it's always good to know like what stuff we should include, because it's always hard to, especially with some of our academic work sometimes, like it's always nice to branch out and show like more of what we can do instead of the final product. It's always
nice. You know how you get marks in a math for showing how you did it, even if you get the question wrong. If you got like a page that shows your process, and it's not, because you show these pictures and the client's always asking you, what was your role in that drawing? You know, it's, oh, I stole it from the other group member. So if you can show a little bit of process, that'll help everybody.
Thank you so much.
Next, I have a question for Ryan. How does the relationship with the media you produce continue to further your architectural practice?
Hey guys, I'm not quite there yet. I do create. I do have a small project that I did for a client and I designed a house, and it's got a facade where I essentially created a game that the clients can play and make their own. They literally hand cut their own wall, and so I created a stencil with which they could create their own patterns. Right. So how my research involves people who might like, or the idea of like self-sufficiency, or at least like aesthetic games, is where I'm at right now.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially that, because you're like, what kind of, do you use like the media and idea, like especially in the presentation, you're talking about how you use like media to influence and create that like thesis space. Do you like plan to, you might have answered this, like further that into your like extra office and try to incorporate it in there? Or are you trying to keep these two, like your meme account and everything separate? Or are you going to try to like merge them? I don't know
Yeah,
if you
no,
can answer that. Yeah.
I don't have plans. I don't have plans to try to expand like a practice. I have plans to expand media and the kind of I'm especially interested in extra institutional learning and teaching. So courses and stuff that you can get on the internet that are more generally available than necessarily teaching. So that's kind of where I'm at with that.
Yeah, so that answering that little add-on question. So we have another question for Alex. So someone just said they just applied to the trainee assistant art director position for the Guild apprentice program. So the question is, when you start off, do you need to have a level of experience with construction drawings and Rhinos? I think you kind of answered this, like, do you start off by shadowing people, and like, do you eventually learn these skills when you're just starting off?
Well, since I came from architecture, I did have those skills already. So I did have experience doing construction drawings. And so I suppose if you don't, you would have to probably take a course. Like you'd probably have, but you guys know how to do that through your course now, right? Like, I don't know how qualified this person is now, so I'm not sure like where they're starting from.
No, they didn't say, but I know in school, like we are taught to, like we start, well, especially for artists, we start using Rhino and stuff like that. Like from the beginning in first year, we kind of start using it. So we do have a basic. Do you think it is helpful for someone to know these skills before going into this position?
Yes, I think at least know the programs, and because all the roles are pretty niche roles. I mean, perhaps you do shadow a little bit, and so you start off as a trainee, but as a trainee you don't actually do any set design. So the trainee position is more just learning about the industry, and you do a lot of errands and just assisting people in the department. So you actually wouldn't be responsible for any sets of your own at all. So once you sort of establish yourself as a trainee, then you move up to the next level, which is a second assistant. And then in that position, they might give you bits of a set to do. So they might see how you handle like maybe one room out of a big set, for example. So you could, in that sense, shadow someone, a more senior person, if you're assisting that senior person. So you might do that for a few shows, and then once you kind of build up the skills, eventually you'll become more senior and you'll get your own set. But yeah, I suppose in the beginning you would be assisting someone else. So there would be opportunity for shadowing. I just think it depends also on the size of their show. So some shows are really small and there might not be enough time for anyone senior to shadow because they'll be busy doing their own projects. So yeah, it's hard for me to just generalize across the whole industry, I think, because every show is kind of set up a little bit differently depending on the size of the department. So I would recommend, if you're junior and you don't have those skills, to try to get on a really big show like Star Trek, for example, where the department is 20 plus people, and then you have a lot of senior people that you can be mentored by, rather than a smaller show, which is low budget, and there might only be 5 people in the art department, and everyone's running around with their, like, they're just so busy they wouldn't have time to help you. So yeah, I don't know, does that answer the question?
Thank you. Yeah. We have another question. This one is for, oh no, I mean, you want to say this one?
Yeah, sure. This one's for Peter. It's, as a designer, what is your process in creating that story visually and then bringing it into a 3D experience?
Great question. It all starts with narrative. There are sort of 3 questions in experience design, and it's as you step into a space, the end result is, you know, where am I? And then sort of the next one, you have to get that right away as someone, like a guest walking into a park, you know, or an experience. Where am I? Who am I is the next one. Like, what's my role to play? Okay, I'm in the desert and I'm an explorer. Okay. And then the third one, when people are really paying attention, you know, and what am I doing? You know, I'm searching for the, you know, green rune of, you know, destiny. And then the ride itself is a kind of the climax of that narrative. So you start with a story, you have to do a lot of research. You know, where are you in the world, the local culture, working with local experts, bringing in additional knowledge to sort of make everything authentic, and then trying to build up this sort of story. And then you're visualizing in plan how the different zones might work together. You know, what are the different emotions that you want to experience? How can the different, you know, what's the interrelation between, you know, are you waiting to get on the ride? You don't want to just be standing in line. So you're working in sketch. And then and then there's these kind of sketches that are more like storyboards. They're experiential. What is the emotion? And then that kind of moves into more at a scale sketch, where you're trying to bring the story into the massing. So we'd immediately move over to SketchUp or 3D Studio Max or whatever you want. And then you've got this massing that's really bare bones. And then you set up view angles. You know, you've got the ride, you know how big it is. And then you feed that back to the concept artists. Previously, they were working just in pure imagination. Now they're drawing on top of a base render that's to scale, so they can start to understand, you know, what they're working with, and you can imagine how big the facades are. And then you can draw on all the different professions. You know, you want to actually put the sign in because you want it to be integrated. So you've got the graphics team working with you. And it's this sort of Photoshop, SketchUp, Lumion, lighting. Do you want to animate stuff and then just line drawing and then coloring? And you sort of flip-flop between the different realms to try and build up that detail, and so you're not just stuck in cold 3D rendered world, but you're also not just in fantasy land of scaleless sketches, right? So you have to marry the two. It's very fun and cool.
That's really interesting. That almost parallels kind of the type of thinking we do with concept building in architecture in general. So it's interesting how closely related those two kind of thought process are with two different types of industries. So thanks. I'm going to go back to a bit more of a general question for everyone. So a job is often more than just the work you produce, and there are many aspects that can affect how you enjoy your role. So with choosing such unique careers, have you found that there are ancillary or niche benefits that you didn't first realize would be there? Flexible schedules, meeting new peoples, kind of the culture of that work. And we're going to start off with Ryan, perhaps. How is meme culture helping?
Well, I don't make memes for a living. I don't make memes for a living, but I think being a content creator is like really, really fun, because I get to have an audience that like understands a lot of what I go through. So it's like fun to be able to share things that happen to you or things that you're thinking about with people, and have them like understand or share them with each other. And then that idea that you have, for me, that those ideas might filter down into other things, and you start seeing people's patterns of behaviors and like literally like memes or whatever, changing what we think about style and changing how the architecture field presents itself. So that's the really exciting and rewarding part, is when I see things that I don't like, I can't say, oh, like I'm taking credit for that or anything. But what I can say is, wow, it's interesting to watch the field change. I wonder how much of this grassroots efforts are involved. And when I see things like the School of Architecture at Taliesin, where I was teaching formerly, surviving its like battles with the Frank Lloyd Wright Foundation and finding a way to stay alive. I don't know how knowledgeable everyone is here about that, but when I see things like that, I get really passionate, fired up, and excited about what it means to like create content and what that means for architecture in space.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that's interesting to see bringing up that Frank Lloyd Wright thing, and like that idea. Like I like the idea that you're passionate about this, and I think that's what is good for all of us to take away. Like also pursuing like our future careers too. Like you want to be passionate about what you're doing, and then you'll know it's like you're happy what you're doing. It won't feel like it's work, but you'll still enjoy it, and it won't be like running down. So thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Peter, would you like to go next answering this question? We can repeat it if you want us to.
No, it's okay. Unexpected perks, not perks, but awesomeness. For sure, travel is one. I was not expecting to go to Colombia to research waterfalls. I was not expecting to go to, the Middle East to look at a site that's like a cliff that's half the Grand Canyon in the middle of nowhere. I wasn't expecting to do those types of things, and it kind of helped me understand that the world's a lot bigger than I thought, and that North America is pretty new and kind of like the new kids on the block with the wacky we're the wacky teenagers of the world. And we think we're all that, but there's just this cultural history that far supersedes what we've come up with. Another one was that working in a multidisciplinary design studio, that sharing projects with people with disparate knowledge and the ability to learn from people with sort of open minds was a huge benefit. And I would highly encourage people to look for that in an office culture where, people aren't guarding their ideas. They're open with them, and you can kind of see it in their eyes when you show up.
Thank you. I didn't know that you get to travel to all those sites. You've probably been to a lot of places, I'm assuming. That's cool. I didn't know that. That's actually really cool. And then Alex, if you would like to wrap up this question.
Sure. I would say my favorite part when I first started, or even still, it's just how fast everything happens. And so when you design something, it gets built. It's always amazing how fast they can build stuff. So they build things like within a week or 2 weeks, and you're just amazed as to like how they did it. It's magic. So, and then just, also it's really fun how they can make things look fake, but they like fake things look real, and you just don't even know. So it's interesting how we get to be kind of creative with how we make stuff. So a lot of the times, like if we're making caves or rocks, they will just sculpt them out of foam and then paint them, and or the sculptors will go and get a mold from a real rock, and then they'll make that mold in their studio, and then they will replicate an exact formation of what they got in real life, and then they paint it to look real, and then on the screen you really you can't tell. So in Lost in Space, for example, there was a rock climbing scene, and this was in Vancouver. They went to Squamish, and they actually molded the rocks, and then they remade them in the studio out of foam. And so just the sculpting aspect, and it's just really amazing the amount of talent that you're surrounded by every day. Like you're just all the graphic artists, the painters, the sculptors, the carpenters, and there's just so many people that you just come across all the time. You're always meeting new people. So I would say, and everyone's just very passionate about the project as well. So just being in an atmosphere where everyone just loves what they're doing and loves coming into work and loves making what they're doing. So I think all those make it enjoyable.
Do you find that when you're like, say, producing drawings, does like your job overlap a lot with like the artists or the sculptors, and as they're going on, like, is your parts, are they kind of going hand in hand? Because sometimes with us we learn about like the design process, and it's like you do your drawings and then you kind of like send them off, but do you work kind of simultaneously with other like trades, I guess?
Well, it starts with us. It starts in the art department. So the art department is responsible for the design and the vision of the show, and then we will hand off the drawings to the construction team or the sculptors or the painters or the set decorating department or the props department or wardrobe department. So we hand everything off, but we have to maintain constant communication with them. So it's not like we just hand it off and then don't ever talk to them. Like, we have regular meetings, regular updates, because sometimes they might do a test of something. So for example, like they might do a built test of an example of something. And then we have to communicate, oh, do we like that? Or we have to take photos, send it to the director. So there's always back and forth between all the departments. And so usually I'll go and check in with the construction team pretty regularly, every few days or so, just to see if they have any questions, just to see the progress is coming along. And then I'll check in with the sculptors and the painters, see how their progress is coming along. So it's always very regular communication back and forth.
That does make sense, especially because your projects are so fast-paced, you were saying sometimes. Thank you. So Ryan, our next question is for you. We're going to go back to individual questions. So Ryan, how do you feel like bringing or changing academic language into the social media sphere and making it more casual while still tackling like serious and important architecture topics? So do you find it like difficult or like?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Yes, I do. I do find it difficult. But I actually find it extremely rewarding. Before I ever wanted to be an architect, all I wanted to ever do is think and talk. I was like, if I could just do that, that would be great. And I love architecture. I love making things. I like drawing and all that stuff. But I really also just love to think and to talk. And I think that the challenge of how to take something academically and distill it, or big ideas and distill it. I mean, that's what a meme is, but that's also what a lot of, like, that's how we compartmentalize knowledge. That's how we learn in general, is we take things and we make them and we reduce them. So that's what I like to do. So that's part of why I do what I do.
Yeah, and I think though, because you make it so casual and also available on social media, and how we were talking earlier, that you also make it available to like non-architecture people who come from kind of like an architecture background, that it does allow more people to know of these architecture topics, but because it's so casual and it does just feel like a conversation. So even though you say it's hard, but you do it successfully, so it's good. You do it great.
Thank you.
No problem. Noemi, do we have another? I think we have some more individual questions.
Yeah, there's one here for Alexandra, asking, what was the transition like from architecture to film? Were you qualified to join the DGC with your past experience in architecture, or were you required to complete indie projects before joining?
Yes, I was overqualified. Yeah, so I had a portfolio that I made with projects from school, my thesis project. And so when I started networking to get in, I would show the people who I was networking with my portfolio, and it was enough to get in. And then I did not have to do any indie projects. I know some people do that on the side as well, because if they want to move up faster, because it's very structured, the tiers. But if you want to work in a sort of in a more senior position earlier, they do indie projects to show that they can be in that position. But I didn't do any, I don't have experience in indie projects myself.
Perfect. Good to know. I think there's another individual question here as well for Peter. Nicole, if you'd like to extend that.
Yeah, no problem. If someone was asking, Peter, does your design process take any inspiration from immersive theater companies such as Punch Drunk, if you've heard of them?
I don't know Punch Drunk. I know immersive theater. Yeah, I mean, immersive theater for me means that the audience is up close and personal with the actors and are moving through the sets with the actors, as opposed to, it's breaking down the relationship between the audience and the actor and bringing the audience into that process. That was something I was talking to a client about last week. We were trying to, at theme parks, we got this huge set that you're designing. You know, when I first started, I was like, what is theming? Why is everything themed? I don't understand. It seems kind of fake. But then increasingly, as you know, the art and the artistry of it and has been built up to building worlds like at Harry Potter or Star Wars, where you're stepping into your favorite themed universe. It's like you're in the world. You feel surrounded by it in all ways. How can you leverage this incredibly expensive set that you've created and utilize it in other ways? So instead of having, you know, just you go into the theater and there's a performance, why not have a performance that moves through the park and utilizes these incredible facades as backdrops for a performance that moves through the space and takes you on a tour of the park, but using the park itself as the set.
In a way that you are immersing people in this world, you are creating like this world for them to come and enjoy. So it like they do very like relate hand in hand. We are going to go back to another general question, kind of geared to all of you. So Naomi, do you want to ask this one?
Yeah. So this is about just time management and life work balance. There was a question in the Q&A asking, do you feel like it's manageable to have a life work balance? I've heard this was in relation to Alex, that it can be very time consuming to work on sets and hours are crazy. So is it manageable to work and have family or see friends? And I think this question would extend to all of you. What's it kind of like having a work-life balance in the career that you're in? We can start with Alex though.
Yeah, I would say it's a bit tough in the film industry, but what makes it manageable is you don't have to work 12 months a year because you're freelance. So a lot of people work maybe 8-9 months, and my goal is to do 6 months. So you could work 6 months on, 6 months off. You can just do one show a year. You can choose when you want to take your time off. You can choose when you want to travel. So yes, when you're working, it's quite intense. I mean, you have weekends free. You don't have to work overtime on weekends, which is great. So evenings, it's a bit tough because sometimes I would get home at 8 or 8:30. You just eat dinner and then go to bed, and then you kind of do the same thing the next day. But I feel like a lot of jobs are like that. I don't know a lot of jobs that you actually finish at 5 or 5:30. So if you enjoy what you do, if you can do it for 6 months and then take a break, I think it's worth it.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I'm going to extend the same question off to Ryan, and kind of how does that relate to academia? I know you said you have a very broad work relationship, so you can kind of do what you'd like. Does that kind of extend into your life work balance and make it so that you're always thinking about academia?
Well, no, I'm not often thinking about academia. In fact, I have the distinct role as, right now I'm an adjunct faculty. So I walk in the door, I teach, I leave. I have no other obligations. So at the moment, so my, so I might teach from 1 to 4 on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And like, that's my week, right? But outside of that, there's a I'll tell you about being a content creator is the constant undying, unyielding pressure to create new, interesting, provocative, cool, immediate responses to cultural events in the world that that doesn't reward you at all, except for possibly likes and stuff. So you have to be thinking about what you really seek to gain out of it, whether or not it's something that you're interested in directly monetizing. For instance, a lot of people, you don't actually make a lot of money on TikTok, for example. TikTok doesn't pay you a lot. You have to find a way to transition audiences. And so so to answer that question, the work-life balance can be hard to get a hold of if you're not in it for a good reason. And so when I watch the Super Bowl or something, I'm waiting for that one moment that is going to be a meme, and you just, you take a picture and you're like, done. And you can do it immediately, put your phone away and enjoy the rest of the game. You're like, that was the one, I got it. We're good. And whatever you want to do, but you have to set strict hours and charge your phone.
Good advice. Keep that in mind. And the same question, we'll extend it to Peter as well. What is your work-life balance? I mean, obviously now you're traveling as well, and so that might infringe on what your hours are kind of like. So what is that like in your career?
I think typically when you first start a job, you jump in with both feet, and you need to get up to speed, and you need to get stuff in your wheelhouse. When you first start a new job, everything's new. You don't understand the process. You're insecure, and you're trying to prove yourself, and you're trying to figure out how to contribute and how to apply your knowledge. And so for a while at the beginning of almost any job, maybe the first year, I don't know, 2 years, you're going full throttle till you get a sense of what to expect and how to participate. And I think that's true as you go through your career. I'm a little bit older now, and you don't realize that you've built up skills along the way, and that you can handle stress and you can handle unforeseen situations because of the experiences that you've had previous in your career, and you build that up, and that knowledge and that ability to have seen something and known that you can carry through with your team, and you can stay calm, and that's a skill set into itself. And so you kind of learn to respect what you've built up along the years. And yeah, you just kind of have to make priorities. I think that when you're first out of school, maybe you've got a little bit more time to contribute to your profession. Just jump in with both feet, and that's why you want to find something passionate. It's still work, but you're in your flow state. And then just being kind of mindful. Like if you talk to a financial planner about your career, you work out all these things. If I make this money, then my RSP and all this stuff, and you guys are like, I can't even get a job. At the end of the day, if you are not making money, the whole scheme is thrown out the window, right? Like if you can't make money, then it doesn't matter what your plan was to try and get to wherever you want to get to. So your own personal, physical, and mental health are the most important pieces of the puzzle. Because if you're not healthy, you can't work, and your whole plan is screwed. So you owe it to yourself to, spend an inordinate amount of time and prioritize your own personal, physical, and mental health as the number one piece of the puzzle, the number one most important thing. And then you'll be able to apply yourself at work. And that balance isn't about, oh, can I spare some time away from work for myself? It's that I can't work properly if I don't prioritize myself.
Right. That's very good advice and good to keep in mind. I know architecture can be a bit less of that narrative. So it's good advice to keep in mind, especially as students. I think we have one final question. That's a full group question, and Nicole's going to ask this one.
This is going to be our last question, a question to kind of wrap up everything here today. So our question is, where do you guys see yourself in the next 10 years? Are there any other passions you think you'll branch into? Like, do you have an ultimate end goal? And we will go with Alex, if you'd like to answer this one. first, if that's okay. Or you just going with the flow right now? But
Well, I think as I mentioned, I'm hoping that I only have to work one show a year in the future. So maximum 6 months a year is definitely what I'm striving towards and hoping to start soon. So art directing, yeah, I don't know, 10 years. I don't know. I have not thought about it that far. It feels really far in the future for me right now. I don't know.
yeah. No, it is a long period. I know sometimes people think of like what they're just focusing on now. But no, that's good to know. Like you at least know you want to do like your one show, which is good. You like where you're at. You found after doing so many things, you found what you like and where you're at. So thank you. Ryan, if you'd like to answer this question next.
I'm gonna make music and be a rock star. Yeah. 10.
Okay. Send us all tickets.
Yeah, that's a tough question for me. I think I've got a lot of paths. I'm interested in possibly making games of my own using architecture and my experiences there, and I'm interested in continuing to open up the discourse about what architecture could be, and how to challenge it, and to take the boat where it flows.
Yes, no, I like that. And then Peter, would you like to wrap up this question for us?
Yeah, I don't know if I'll be in another profession again, but it's possible that a fourth profession could appear. Currently, I'm just really, theme parks, they used to be pretty linear and they would tell a pretty singular story, that Disney nonsense. And as I'm working globally and as the world is sort of changing and people's minds are opening, thinking about how, diversity of thought can influence a more diverse experience, and different people's perspectives can be represented within experiential design, and coming to respect the amazingness of a ride, and how that surviving it creates a memory, because your body has gone into biological shock, and you're going to remember this moment forever. What do we want you to remember, and what memories are we trying to create, and how can we be more sophisticated and scientific and culturally authentic and relevant to opening people's minds and using that as a tool for, telling different stories? That's what I get really excited about.
Thank you so much for answering those. Risa, if you want to. Yeah.
Sure. Thanks so much for coming and having this discussion with us. I feel like we branched off in so many topics, like from work-life balance to your individual passions, how you got to where you are today, which I think is great. And the point of this discussion really so that we can open it up to students to see how they relate to the careers that you're in, and give us some more information about how you all got here. We'd really like to also thank Vincent, Nicole, and Naomi for facilitating this discussion and being with us today, as well as our AIAS board for all the behind the scenes work that made today happen. And of course, Leo Reitman, our IT specialist, for being with us to make sure the webinar ran smoothly, which it did, so thank you. And of course, our audience, we hope that this discussion inspired you to look into all the exciting paths available with architecture. We know we couldn't get to every single question, but we hope that we got through the general idea of what you wanted to ask. This is our last AIAS event of the year, but we hope that you'll come join us next year at our future events. And if you're interested in being on the board to help plan events like this, we do have positions available in the summer that will be opening up. I'm sure that Vince wanted to say a couple of words as well.
Oh, did I? I don't know. I'm the prof. I'm the old prof in the room, so I guess I gotta close out a couple of things. So once again, thank you very much, AIAS, for making sure this event could happen. I do appreciate that, and also a special note to our 3 guests. Of course, it's just friends and family discount. Thank you very much for coming in and being part of this. I know that there's as many questions that we've answered, there's as many questions that are still up. And I suspect that most of you, if if it's okay, you will have this link, so you can definitely rehash some of this, because I believe a lot of the questions that have been asked are answered in some of the presentations. So I think hopefully that'll help out as many people as possible. Once again, the architecture education that you all get from whichever program you might find yourselves in right now, it does open up a huge spectrum of career paths. And I think that this should really motivate you and inspire you. Certainly just listening to some of the stuff that you folks do. Really, Ryan, you're actually going to go and make video games now. You might want to talk to Peter about that Rockstar burnout experience. And I mean, like, Ryan, Peter, you're traveling all over the place and you're impressing people. And of course, Alex, I'm just thinking, man, you had so many other perks to talk about, like, meeting up celebrities and stuff, but we'll hold off on that. So I do want to say it's very inspiring to hear all the stuff you guys have got. And again, definitely thank you very much, everybody, for attending. And that includes the audience here. So thank you very much.